your cameras, we can get going.
I was almost late, and I think the last 15 minutes there must have been an intergalactic time warp because something happened.
Oh dear. Maybe there's an artery clog in the whole internet fiber world. Who knows?
The artery clog's probably mine, Catherine.
Well, good morning, everyone. Why don't we kick off the Washington County Board of Commissioners work session for Tuesday, March 2nd. Welcome, everyone, to the month of March. This is the voice of Chair Catherine Harrington, and on the commission today, we have a full commission attending the meeting as usual. Commissioner Jerry Willey, Commissioner Pam Treese, Commissioner Roy Rogers, and Commissioner Nafisa Fye. The first item on the agenda is board and leadership communication. Which commissioner would like to go first?
I can go first. I think, pardon me, I think I've had one heck of a lot of briefings lately, and probably like all of you. Yesterday had a nice farewell with Doug Kelsey. It was a virtual send-off, and I was privileged to say some remarks to him, and I've known Doug and worked with him. We have a meeting of Worksource on Wednesday, and I know Commissioner Treese will be there as well, and that's always an interesting dialogue. That's probably it. I think we have our Saturday event, but beyond that, I'll let somebody else talk about that.
All righty. Anyone else?
Pam, you have to go first, you know.
Oh, I always do.
I know, you have to go. Yeah.
Nope.
I'll go. I'll go next. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair. I'll be brief and just share a couple of things. Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Rogers. It's been quite a bit of briefings, good briefings. But one of the things, last week was last week of February, Black History Month. And I did a great talk and with great students at Tualatin High School, their Black History celebration, and was part of a panel. And Philip put together a great presentation for the students on what the county does and for the community and what county commissioners do for the community. And it was really a great presentation. Thank you so much, Philip. And as well as last week, to close out Black History Month, we also kicked off our Equity Leadership Council, which is a lot of presence, yay! And was a really great conversation and discussion. And we addressed and covered so much. And I'm excited to be part of that council and look forward to the work we're gonna do, and approved our charter, approved so much. I think it was a very streamlined, well done meeting, even though there's close to 30 of us there. So congratulations, Tanya and Latricia and the team. And then, I think I had a great meeting with Michelle Gilla with PMAR, just to have robust conversation about the housing inventory problem and the supplies, how we're down to 2 weeks, and it was a really good conversation. So that's my briefing or my update.
Thank you, Commissioner Fye. Commissioner Willey, how about you next?
Yeah, I probably the best news I have is that you'll remember a week or two ago we had a presentation on the Salmonberry Trail, and you heard that we had applied for a Murdoch Foundation grant, and I got word yesterday that we had been awarded that grant. So it is going to be. Let me read some of the information from it. It's It's going to fund a director of development and communications through the Murdoch Charitable Trust. It'll be rolled out over 3 years. The first year they fully fund the position. The second year it's 2/3. The third year it's 1/3. So there's still a lot of marketing and fundraising that'll have to go on to keep those programs going. But that was a good step forward, and so we're pretty excited about the fact that we got that, and that's going to help a lot. I also met on Friday the Association of Oregon and California Counties, and once again we got a fairly significant update on the forest fires that were in Central and Southern Oregon. They experienced some of the same things that the Sandy Am fire did. A significant amount of forest trees were burned, and so they're trying to figure out how much of it, the timber that's burned, can be recovered and actually harvested. There are significant restrictions against that in some of the forests, so I would say maybe a third of that, those burned areas will be able to be harvested, but that's an ongoing political battle, I'll put it that way. So that was very interesting. Met with North Plains Mayor Lenahan and City Manager this week just to talk about some of their expansion opportunities, and certainly they are a rapidly growing community, and they're working very hard on making sure they do it right, since it's going to change the dynamics of their city over the next 10 years pretty considerably. And then last, I think everyone knows this, but the Hillsborough and Beaverton chambers have agreed to share an executive director. That will be Deanna Palm, will be overseeing both of those chambers. And we look forward to seeing how all of that will roll out. I think that's a good opportunity for our two largest chambers in Washington County to kind of join forces and certainly have some persuasion if they need it, either in legislation or with us. And so I look forward to seeing how all those details roll out. So I think that's all I got.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Treese.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Fye and Commissioner Willie, for giving me the opportunity to get my notes together. I appreciate it. So last week, the last few weeks have been busy. I mean, we all know that, but it's been kind of crazy. I did attend the MPAC meeting on Thursday night, I guess it was. I want to shout out to Chris Defaba for getting me prepared for that meeting. The schedule included a discussion on the CEDS, which is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, the COVID recovery plan, emergency routes, and the small business or the nonprofit capacity building grants that are allocated throughout the region. A couple highlights that I'd like to make is that the CEDS is a little bit on hold. They're still working on that, so we'll have continued involvement there, if we choose to. The recovery plan, I'm following that pretty closely because the recovery plan really looks a lot like the work that we've done here in Washington County. So, I mean, there's all the components are, it's kind of like, I've seen this before. So I'm comfortable with that. What I'm not necessarily comfortable with yet and want to make sure that we are exploring is once that plan is approved, what is the process? What does that mean in terms of evaluation of any future dollars we may get? So I've still got some research to do on that, but I want you to know that eyes are on it right now. The other piece is the grant program. That's a $400,000 program that allocates 5 $80,000 grants to CBOs, and their primary target right now is Washington County and Clackamas County. And I've sent an email off. I haven't heard back yet, but I want to know from both Latricia and Amanda, what exactly do we have staff eyes on that right now? And I believe that the application end date is the end of this month. So I just want to make sure that our CBOs in Washington County have clear information and, you know, can get into the race, so to speak.
I believe
Yesterday,
what you're referring to is the community engagement grant.
thank you very much for the clarification. So yes, that's exactly right. Yesterday I met with commissioners from AOC, actually pulled together a meeting on the Federal Emergency Rental Assistance Program and Housing Stability Program. Jenny Proctor and I met with AOC. Andy Smith pulled the meeting together. Martha Schrader, Commissioner Schrader, Commissioner Fisher, Commissioner Farr from, I believe, Lane County were all in attendance. And it was an interesting meeting. You know, we have been allocated $18 million. We've looked at this already, and I believe we have allocated, I think it's 8 million to community action. Maybe it's 10 million and reserved 10. Thank you, Tanya. And so we're in process here. But the meeting was kind of a meeting about, are we all on the same page? Are the counties in communication about this? What's interesting to me is that, no surprise here, Jenny's already involved in a group of staffers that are working together to understand how each of the counties are administering the dollars. So my comfort level is pretty high with this. But there is going to be a second meeting of commissioners around this issue, and I will be in attendance at that meeting as well. So just to let you know that that's going on. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is I had a meeting last week with David Williams he's the government relations person from Beaverton School District, with Don Grotting, the superintendent of the Catherine knows all these people. They're not coming
The
to my mind.
Northwest ESPD. ESD. Education Service District, ESD.
I think you put a P in there thinking about it. but anyway, that's what I always do. So the idea is to listen to what their thoughts are about. They're looking at a preschool program. I'm still meeting with the mayors, as I've mentioned before, about what does childcare mean as a whole, and how does that fit with preschool, after care, daycare, all those different issues. So I'm in the process of pulling in information, and that's where I am right now. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to talk with you. I think that maybe I know they've talked to the chair. I don't know who else they're going to be talking to, but just know that I'm in the loop there. So that's it for me.
Thank you, commissioners. Commissioner Fye, thank you for mentioning the Tualatin High School Black History Month event that you participated in, and Philip's presentation on what Washington County does. Ms. Angie, can we make sure that that presentation is leveraged and maybe packaged up with some board presence and provided to our community? That'd be pretty awesome. I know Philip, back in my citizen involvement days, made a similar presentation over 2 decades ago about what the county does. So it would be interesting for me, at least, to experience that as in this point of time. So I'll just mention a few things. Very busy week this week, going through the interview process for the new CEO of the Washington County Visitors Association. Pretty intense semifinal interviews this week, Monday, Thursday, Friday. I had a meeting with Maria Pope, the CEO of Portland General Electric, on their power restoration from the ice storm. As we all know, Washington County fared pretty well. We have a lot of utility undergrounding based upon investments in the development of neighborhoods throughout the county, including in urban unincorporated Washington County, as well as in the city. So the power outages in Washington County were limited, at least in the PGE network. There were some outages in Forest Grove that their power and light district handled as part of the city. But there were some outages in Beaverton, in Tualatin, many different outages there in both the part in Washington County and Clackamas County, and some in Sherwood as well. So their foundation is going to be making some community donations to help community members recover from that. A lot of people lost contents of freezers. We have a roundtable on Thursday. I'll be sending some updated docs from our January, February roundtable on Wednesday in preparation for that. So just a heads up. And one reason why I give the heads up on this is because we've received multiple documents Friday and yesterday to review in a timely manner. So heads up on this one. And then let's see, just a couple of other things. I hope, well, I know I've sent you all the latest charts from the state on the vaccination deployment. And I think I mentioned in that email that I'm once again a little surprised how it takes time for even all of our elected peers to consume the material and understand what it means. We as a state are on a very good path. I really appreciated the email, the OHA director, Paul Allen email of this morning that reinforces really the incredible choices that all community members here in Oregon have made to save lives and to help recover from this pandemic. So job well done. I think that's pretty much it from me. I do have a couple of questions that I'll raise during, well, oh, no, sorry. I just wanted to make sure that you all have noticed the community corrections briefing memo from staff, and we can come back to that on Thursday at our roundtable through budget conversations. But lastly, I wanted to mention that we received a late breaking memo from staff on the community investment conversation. And I don't know if you're all prepared to close on that memo today, or if we want to close on that on Thursday. How many of you have had a chance to even look at that? Because it's a memo from us. Okay.
I'm prepared to support it.
Catherine, is there, I'd like just a little more time to look at it more closely. I've just scanned it. I haven't looked at it in depth.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. So
Yeah.
We'll come back to it on Thursday morning, if that's good. I think it's a pretty good memo, but I know there are a couple of changes that I'll want to make. And it is a memo from us, so we need to make sure that it works for us. So that'd be great. So we'll come back to that on Thursday. Okay, great. Well, now we'll turn to leadership communication. Ms. Angie.
Good morning, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. So I'm just going to pick up on that last thread. I have asked staff to review our process similar to the community investment conversation memo or a recent GR request for the board to sign on a letter to determine a better process. It is completely recognized. I will say you're swimming in briefings, staff emails, and requests. I hear that, I see that, and notice that. So we are working on a process to better streamline and raise up, because sometimes we do need quick action and input from the board to be able to move the work forward. So more to come on that. I just wanted to just share, I hear you and recognize that. Want to highlight Matt Craigie will be starting our new economic development manager on the 8th. And I would like to ask him to join this leadership conversation at our next board meeting, just to introduce him so you can all see and meet him face to face.
I was just laughing at myself because when Commissioner Treese was talking about representing us at MPAC and the SEDS economic development stuff and recovery plans, I was thinking of Matt and wondering, oh, I hope he's fully integrated in that. And he hasn't even started yet. Oh dear. I've already been thinking of him as doing this work already and integrated in with the regional team. Silly me.
Give him another week, Chair. Also, our third staff assistant to the board position has closed, so we will be starting screening the applications and moving that position forward. As the board knows, this position is the position that's assigned to serve Commissioner Fye and Commissioner Rogers. So I'll keep the board updated as we move through this process. I was able to have a briefing with Novak Consulting on the CAO assessment on Friday, as it is their midpoint. I just want to express appreciation to all the board members for your time in interviews, as well as CAO staff and department directors for spending time and giving their thoughts. This is an important part of the process. Novak is currently using that as a data point and also benchmarking with other organizations. So more to come. Just wanted to let you know we are on track and on schedule for that to come before the board at the April roundtable. Commissioner Treese.
Oh, which reminds me, I neglected to highlight for commissioners that one of the items in our email boxes last week is the assessment survey for the CAO 6-month review. So I'm not very organized right now with regard to capturing all these things that are coming at us and making sure I help by giving a verbal heads up in our work sessions. My apologies. It's coming fast and furiously.
Commissioner Treese, you had raised the Metro Community Engagement Grants. Just from a data point, we have shared that with our list of 250 community partners. So trying to get that word out actively of that grant availability. And then also just from a COVID operations standpoint, we currently have one active case of an employee who is quarantined. So still our numbers remain low, and we are still encouraging telework, our community accessing our services virtually. I did share with the board change in LUT lobby hours moving forward and closure on Fridays. I just find the service delivery model interesting for LUT and how 95% of our business currently is online. So I do think that is important for us to note and still allow those in-person services. However, it is true that our community is accessing services differently than they did at this time last year. So we continue to learn and grow in that space. And that includes my weekly update.
I have a question for you, if you could address. So during the recent ice and snowstorm, LUT operations worked to ensure, along with partner agencies, specifically cities and ODOT, to ensure that emergency routes and major arterials were clear. And part of that was laying down gravel on various roads. And I appreciate that, but that's half of the equation. The other half of the equation is cleaning all that stuff up because there are many roadways, the middle of intersections, and even bike lanes that are littered with the gravel. And I know there is some street sweeping going on, but this is the first major ice and snowstorm where I have seen that graveling in my time here on the commission. So I would like to know what the operational policy is and the approach. What are the goals for getting all that stuff cleaned up within some set time frame? And as Mr. Roberts has mentioned, Washington County has a street sweeper, and I know that Clean Water Services does curbed road sweeping throughout the year in order to benefit clean water and make sure that the sewers, the street sewers, aren't clogged with gravel. So if we could, or at least I know I'm interested. I don't know if there are other commissioners who are interested in understanding this, but I'd like to know.
Thank you for that question, Chair Harrington. And Stephen Roberts and I had just recently connected on this. However, I don't have the detailed information in front of me. So we'll follow up in an email to the board so you have that information, especially if you get constituent requests.
Perfect. And constituent-wise, I heard of a communique from one constituent via Facebook posts, which we all know is not part of our communication vehicle, but they're inquiring about the development of a county land acknowledgement. And I know this is something that our Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer and our community engagement team are working on. I just can't remember what sort of time frame that is on. I appreciate that they're looking at it from the standpoint of what, if anything, do we do such that it is a genuine and long-term solution. So maybe on Thursday, if you could just report back to us on that, that'd be great. Thank you. All right. Any other questions for our CAO? All righty. So over to you, Mr. Rapplier, County Council.
Nothing to report today.
Okay. All righty. Ms. Taniguchi Dennis, CEO of Clean Water Services.
Good morning, Chair Harrington and the Board of Clean Water Services. Just a couple of quick updates. On the COVID front, the team's doing really well. We're at full staffing, so we haven't had any additional COVID cases in the last 2 weeks. So we're very happy with what the team is doing there. The team is working on a repair of at Rock Creek of a tertiary hypochlorite tank. There's a structural issue and they're working through it rapidly. So this is when the team is at their best. It's finding solutions for issues like this. So Nate and the team have the issue well in hand. And we'll coordinate with LUT on Clean Water Services street sweeping cycles. We do sweep our 11 zones each month. So it takes us a whole month to get through our cycles. And we do have 4 sweepers on the road Monday through Thursday, and Friday is the maintenance day. So the teams are out there. But yeah, it is an interesting issue when we got a lot of grit on the road. But other than that, the team's faring well. So thank you, Board.
Does your organization continue on with the sewer surveillance project for a while?
Yes, they're continuing it on. There's contracts in place to monitor COVID for quite a while and learning about it. Dr. Williamson did have some testimony before the legislature. Mark Jockers tells me it went really well. I didn't get to sit in on the presentation, but if the board would like more information, we'll be happy to provide that.
Well, really, I just have a question. I seem to recall that we've seen from data from public health as well as from the state and across the nation that COVID cases are down, which is great. A little bit of concern about variants. Can you speak to the presence of COVID in our community by virtue of the sewer surveillance? Is that also indicating trending down, or what, as it's a data point?
Yes, from the sewer surveillance perspective, we're at a very low level of COVID in the raw sewage right now as it stands. So that's all really great news. It correlates really well. There is research looking for variants in raw sewage. We'll keep the board up to date. There is a dashboard that the team is creating. As soon as they work the bugs out on the dashboard, that'd be something I'll ask Mark Jockers to share with all of you. So it is good news, yes.
Thank you. All righty. Well, anything else from our leadership staff? So we'll turn our attention over to the formal agenda for our meeting today. Are there any questions from commissioners?
Yes, I have one on 1F.
Okay. 1F or 2F? Consent
2F.
agenda item
Consent,
F?
yeah, sorry, yeah, consent.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure I followed you.
More to Tanya, I certainly respect the right of the county administrator to guide within the budget that we pose, as well as our standards. But I really can't tell from this particular outline what the ongoing cost of all of this is. I mean, some of it you say, here's the cost in 2021, but I can't see what it is in the future. Some of it you say that, well, we're going to have to borrow from the general fund for a while until we get money in, but it depends on how that money comes in. And I've never seen during my tenure this many positions being asked for in one particular at one particular time in one particular resolution. So it's a little hard to get my hands around it. After I said all that, I also want to make certain that, I mean, we all understand that we're going to have to tighten our belt a little bit with upcoming years potentially, and hopefully we're not adding positions at the expense of other people in the organization. So just a little confusion on my part as to what this is really doing and the cost of it.
I believe the majority of those positions are for the Supportive Housing Services Program. And we both had commissioner briefings, as well as in our work session recently, outlined how we need to move forward with some of those positions immediately to be successful with implementation by July 1st. And those positions will be reinforced through the funding program at Metro, but we need to advance them now. So that's where there's the general fund loan. In addition, the team has looked at the service need and what level of staff will be needed to support the full extent of the Supportive Housing Service Program going out into the first set of years. Hence the various positions that need to be created, once again, that will be funded through that measure. So that's just a quick overview from me, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Angie for fuller explanation of all positions.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and thank you, Commissioner Rogers, for the question. All of the Department of Housing Services will be funded fully by the Supportive Housing Services measure. The chair is accurate. We do have a general fund loan to fund them until those monies come in, and then those funds will be replaced by the Supportive Housing Services measure. This is very similar to how Clackamas and Multnomah County are also, in essence, staffing up the program. So we are ready to operationalize this this summer of this year.
Can I stop you just for a minute? Let me stop you just for a minute. I understood all of that, but
Okay.
I don't know the extent of the loan and how long you think it's going. I guess it depends on when the taxes come in, but what are your project? I'm just trying for large kind of estimates of are we going to have to loan it 3 or 4 million for? I don't know. Okay, tell me what we're doing.
Yeah, no. So Commissioner Rogers, I don't have those numbers in front of me, so I may be slightly inaccurate in what I say. So we'll follow up. The general fund loan is approximately between $750,000 and $1 million. But once again, I'll follow up with that detail. Okay. We do anticipate within under a 6-month period that fund will be, the general fund will be fully resolved, and that supportive housing services will be operating on its own.
Can I ask you a follow-up then? And I don't want to penetrate too much, but I think it's important. You know my style enough to know that I always like cost recovery. Can we charge lost interest earnings to the program? If
no.
We're upfront lending, we can't. Okay.
No.
Worth a try.
Yep. Good question. The Office of Equity and Inclusion, those two program coordinator positions are consistent with the board resolution. The change is based on what was the budgeted position to what is the classified position. So after our Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer worked with HR on job description review and classification, this is the request based on our human resources comp and class model. So it's, in essence, it's a small increase within the general fund, but still within the 5 positions that the board authorized within the resolution and the budget.
Again, follow up, because my understanding was we're already budgeted. So this is just the incremental difference. Okay?
Correct.
100,000 certainly isn't going to cover those positions. So.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And then within the human resources division, there is one add and one removal. So in essence, this is a reallocation of a staff position to business need. So no net increase in FTEs.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. This is really an anomaly of positions. So I appreciate your question, Commissioner Rogers, and it's really the SHS staffing up that's, to me, kind of makes this stick out more. So appreciate the question and your attention on this.
Do other commissioners have any questions? Okay, I know that I have 2. On item 2A, this is a Clean Water Services item on the Contributed Funds Act. We had a work session on this. I stated that didn't really tell me what I was looking for in terms of what a corrective action, contributed funds agreement would include. Through this packet, we were provided with the CFA, and as noted in the topic sheet, section 12 had the really useful information about what a contributed funds agreement document would go over. So I just wanted to highlight that in terms of a process improvement for next time. Then the question that I have goes to item 2F, which is the same one that Commissioner Rogers had a question on. So you took care of one question that I had on one of the items. Then I was a little puzzled on the topic sheet on page 2 for that item, under the section of additional information, subsection legal history / prior board action. I was really a little confused about why there's this discussion about the affordable housing bond. I wasn't sure if that was just a copy paste, because all the positions were talked about relative to supportive housing services. And so I just found it puzzling. Was there something I missed?
No, thank you for that question, Chair Harrington, and appreciate your attention to detail because I had missed that detail. I think that was a staff error because the legal history should be reflective of supportive housing services, not affordable housing bond. They're two separate measures and programs.
Okay. Well, it may be too that that it's just reminding us of the interplay between those two programs, right? That there are the services that and the funding for the supportive housing within the housing placement. So it could be that, but whatever I wanted to come back to, I wasn't 100% sure of that connection or not. So okie dokie. It wasn't keeping me from supporting that item, but I figured better to ask in the work session than gunk up the work, so to speak, in the meeting later. So thank you very much. Are there any other questions with regard to today's business meeting? Okie dokie, great. Then we can move on to our very full work session agenda. First up is the legislative update. And I believe, Mr. Nagra, that we also have some of our federal delegation with us today.
Not our federal delegation chair, but our federal lobbyists.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, my screen's going wild and I'm getting distracted. Please take it away.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. For the record, my name is Jagjit Nagra, Government Relations Manager here at Washington County. Today, I'm joined by Erin Doyle, our Government Relations Manager for our in-house county lobbying team, and we also have the pleasure of having Steve Palmer and David Haynes from Van Scoyoc Associates. These are our federal lobbyists based in Washington, D.C. Next slide, please. We have a full agenda today, and we're going to kick it off with our federal lobbyists. They're going to be talking about what's going on in the federal ecosystem, right? We're going to talk about the American Rescue Plan. This is the COVID relief package that Government Relations has been keeping you abreast of vis-a-vis the weekly memo. We're going to talk about some major federal legislative initiatives. There's probably good fodder for consumption there, considering we have a new presidential administration and a new Congress. Appropriations. This is every yearly process that the county engages in with our federal delegation for discretional spending, as a reminder. And now here's a good one, earmarks. For those of you who have been in the policy world for quite some time, you'll remember congressionally directed spending or earmarks for capital projects, about over a decade ago. There's rumors that this might be returning, and I'm thinking that that's going to be an interesting conversation for the board to consume. Next, we're going to be shifting gears and going over to our state platform, and we're going to kick off with the state legislative timeline. I'm going to provide some key dates there, and then I'm going to switch it over to Erin Doyle to talk about 4 bills that pertain to prevailing wage. So with that, I will kick it over to Steve and David from VSA. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Jagjit, and thank you, Chair Harrington and members of the board. My name is Steve Palmer at the firm of Van Scoyoc Associates. My colleague David Haynes will join me in presenting in a moment. But what I'd like to do is you can see the slide in front of you, what we're going to cover today. I'd like to kick it off with the American Rescue Plan and kind of give you some of the dynamics of what are happening right now. I know that the government relations staff has kept you abreast of all the major provisions affecting the county. Obviously, we're fighting hard to try to preserve the $350 billion in direct federal financial assistance for counties, working with NACO along the way to do that. As you know, the bill passed the House by 6 votes last week and now is going before the Senate. And just because the Senate is so different than the House, I thought it might be helpful to kind of give you a sense of what's happening there and why it's happening, because it's a little more confusing. It's not as straightforward as it might be with any other piece of legislation. First of all, you've heard the word reconciliation countless times by now, and that's a process that is really aimed at the United States Senate. The House really doesn't benefit from that process at all, but it's a process where we all know that the legislation can pass with 51 votes rather than the 60 votes threat of a filibuster. What we don't know are what is below that level. That's helpful in terms of getting legislation passed. And I should say it's been used numerous times. I actually went back and tried to find out how much in terms of what has been included in major policy bills in reconciliation. And there has been quite a few. The Affordable Care Act was part of reconciliation. The Tax Cut and Growth Act of 2017 was part of reconciliation. So there are some major policy changes that have passed the Congress this way. The one thing we don't hear much about those is the Byrd Rule. What's included in this legislation and what can't be included in this legislation? Well, everything in reconciliation has to be related to the budget somehow, to either cost savings or addressing mandatory spending is basically the situation. And what we're finding is there are a number of provisions that were included in the House bill, such as the proposal to increase the minimum wage to $15, did not meet that threshold. And so there's a young woman who's serves as the parliamentarian in the Senate. She's nonpartisan. She works for both parties, and she made the decision that was unpopular with many, that the minimum wage provision could not be included in that bill. So the bill advances right now without that in it. There are a number of other changes that the Senate are proposing already in their substitute bill, and they'll start debating the substitute amendment tomorrow. Now, the reconciliation process limits debate to 20 hours. So in theory, this bill could be wrapped up rather quickly. They can't filibuster, they can't drag this out, but what they can do is offer countless, endless number of amendments. And you'll hear this weekend the term vote-a-rama. And what it is basically senators can offer as many amendments as they want, and they can structure votes back to back to back, which they'll do, and they'll probably be voting through the weekend in an effort to try to wrap this bill up as quickly as possible. But we can anticipate there are going to be a number of changes to the bill. Senators have been holding their cards fairly close to the vest in terms of what they're going to support and not support in this bill. And I should offer up there are at least two senators that have been looking at the state and local financing, the $350 billion as a source of possibly shifting revenue into infrastructure and broadband programs. But there's been a concerted effort by others to try to fend that off, knowing that next time there will be an infrastructure bill. Chair Harrington.
Yes, sorry for interrupting, Mr.
Nope.
Palmer, but I do want to make sure that while we have the board focused on the American Rescue Plan, that we're able to come to board closure on the proposed letter to the Senator Schumer and Senator McConnell.
Correct. Thank you.
Have all commissioners had an opportunity to read the proposed letter? Okay, is everyone comfortable with the letter as proposed, or do we need to have further discussion? So I see at least 3 of us are ready. 4 of us. Commissioner Rogers, are you okay with signing on to the letter? You're on mute, sir. Sorry.
I know. I'm not sure it's as effective as it could be, but that's why I'm on the fence. I mean, there's nothing really terrible in it, but I guess I'm very lukewarm at best.
So this letter is really just making sure that the case is made to help provide for the state and local funding. We did add a piece to raise the visibility of service districts. I did ask Leah Horner last night about that, and she said that in the current bill as passed by the House, that providing funding through service districts would come basically from the state allocation from the bill. But beyond that, the bill is really focused on ensuring that there's some relief for state and local government. So I'm not sure what more you're looking for in terms of effectiveness.
Let me articulate that. First of all, I appreciated the special service district provision. I'm glad that we're not calling them out, because I've got some down here that were not called out in the original.
Right.
And so I like that generic. This stuff is so fluid that I'm just wondering, this proposal on the infrastructure portion, which could increase by another 3 to 4, I think we're already deficit spending way, way too much. But is there a chance if this, because we got what, 100 million or is it billion? I can't recall, for the light rail project that's in Silicon Valley, got stuffed in here. Is there any way that we can have it a little more open, that we can get some structure language that would kind of, if this thing gets fluid and it starts to move up from 1.9 to whatever, or if other classifications are looked at, that we could insert some language or comments to our legislative delegation that we got projects. I'm still smarting a little bit that we didn't get a Southwest Border project for rail, but we got one in California in this 1.9. If that starts to move at all, and we start talking about some combination of transportation and infrastructure bill in there, or
Well,
at least
certainly, we have already, through our legislative priorities, enabled both our team here in Oregon, our government relations team, as well as our federal lobbyists, to lobby on behalf of our infrastructure needs with every opportunity. The goal of this letter is to help ensure that our voice is exercised to ensure that that state and local government funding is retained in the bill as it goes through the amendment process. So what you're talking about is certainly in play already. We've provided that direction already, and our team continues to work that specifically. And staff will correct me if I'm wrong.
I guess I don't want to fall on the sword, but and talking to G yesterday or the day before, I had no real problem, as I told him, with what was being said. I mean, that's not the issue. And I understand that we've got some direction to be somewhat fluid and to support things, but I guess when you ask for anything, do you throw enough in there that if you do get a change in direction at all, that you don't have to write another letter? And so maybe Steve Palmer or someone would be able to say, does it help?
I don't think we're in a position of needing to write another letter at this point. What I'm really asking is, can we come to closure on this and keep moving on as they represent us and continue to go through all of the amendment process?
If you're asking me, I still would like to hear what Steve says. If we would say,
Sure.
Is it a problem? Is it a problem to say all of the rest of the language, but insert anything, even a sentence that said that we would welcome the opportunity, obviously, if there's additional funding or changes in the American Rescue Plan for a transportation infrastructure component. So,
Commissioner Rogers, if I may, in response to your question, I think there is, you're correct on one point. There is money in there for ongoing transit projects. There's a total of $1.4 billion for about 25 different projects that the House added that for ongoing full funding grant agreements that are not yet in revenue service. So there is money to offset the revenue loss for those. That's what they have said, because I contacted the committee about those, trying to understand what it was they were doing as well. Adding infrastructure, there is infrastructure funding in the bill. It's a policy decision the board can make about whether or not you want to make that kind of a change in the letter, tone of the letter. I can only say from my perspective, the letter probably needs to go sooner rather than later, because as I said, they do start debating the bill tomorrow, and it helps to get the county on record.
That's fine. I understand that. I'm fine.
Okay, so Jagjit, we're all set on the letter then, and our digital signatures can be applied. Thank you for letting us get closure on that, Mr. Palmer.
No, that was my next sentence. So with that, you're absolutely, you stole my next line. So with that, Madam Chair, let me turn it over to my colleague, David Haynes, so he can talk about a couple of pending bills that have been introduced in the last several days that might be of interest.
Good morning, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. Great to be here with you this morning, and wanted to touch on two issues as Steve mentioned. The House is busy this week as they are addressing both election and policing reform. Both of those issues have become major Democratic Party priorities, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. But first, I want to address the election reform, and that's HR 1, the For the People Act. That bill would address campaign and election reform, and election reform has been named a top priority for Democrats this Congress, and that's even highlighted with the bill getting HR 1 and getting tagged as HR 1 as the first few bills you may recall of each Congress are reserved for the majority party's top priorities. And this bill was the first bill introduced in the House and Senate by Democrats. And so the For the People Act, though, would address several election and campaign issues, such as requiring presidential candidates to release their tax returns. Obviously, is coming on the back end of the former president and the issues that came up there. But the bill would also establish online and automatic voting registration and also authorize grants for states to strengthen elections and election system and cybersecurity and other issues as well. That is being considered right now in the House. And as soon as the House wraps that up, and it's expected to pass in the House will then move to policing reform as well. Within policing reform, the House plans to consider the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act this week. The name may sound familiar because it's a similar bill that we discussed last summer and that the House considered and passed as well last summer. The legislation, as you also may recall, it was never considered in the Senate. But that bill is going to address several issues that are currently also being discussed and addressed on the state level, such as in the bill, as a summary, it addresses qualified immunity, profiling, chokeholds, mandatory police registry, and definitely several other issues. Both bills, backing up to both bills, they both will pass in the House, but they're going to have a difficult time passing in the Senate. And Speaker Pelosi even called the current law enforcement reform bill that's going to pass in the House a non-starter in the Senate. So there's lots of work to be done still after this week in the House on both those issues, but wanted to flag those. And with that, we'll pass it back to Steve.
Thank you, David. I had to unmute myself. Appreciate, what we're trying to do here is kind of give you not just a summary of the American Rescue Plan, but David talked about legislation that's pending this week. I would like to look forward to kind of what the next round of legislation is going to be of interest to the county. And these are where opportunities do present themselves for the county in terms of securing some funding victories. Commissioner Rogers is exactly right. The infrastructure bill is probably going to be the next major bill that will come up after the American Rescue Plan is signed into law. And we should try to make clear, the goal is to have that bill on the president's desk signed into law by March 14th. He then shortly thereafter is planning a speech, State of the Union type speech to the joint session of Congress, in which he's going to outline his proposals for the infrastructure plan. But the reason I set up the slide this way is it will include the 5-year surface transportation bill. It will likely include many of the same infrastructure provisions that were in the Moving Forward Act that passed the House last year. You'll see a theme here. David just touched on it. Bills that pass the House that may not pass the Senate. And a clean energy proposal that's actually coming out in about an hour from the House Energy and Commerce Committee. the Clean Futures Act. And so all of those are likely to be rolled into one large bill. And Commissioner Rogers was exactly right, in the range of $3 to $4 trillion, likely offset with increased taxes. If they can't get increased taxes, it will not nearly be that large. The Surface Transportation Bill was a 5-year bill that does include significant increases for transit and would absolutely help the Southwest Corridor project because it would put more money into light rail project development as well as the bus and transit systems around the country. So there are going to be some significant opportunities in that bill, but we don't really know as much as we hope to know. We probably will know in the next several weeks. It's likely to be on the House floor as early as April or May. The Senate, there are several Senate committees that get involved. The one that does highway work, the chairman said he plans to have his bill, that part of the bill, ready for committee by Memorial Day. So we're going to be working with the GR team and the board to be able to make sure that the priorities for the county are articulated during that process. You're incredibly fortunate because in addition to obviously Congresswoman Bonamici playing a lead role in many issues, Senator Wyden now is chairman of the Finance Committee and Senator Merkley on the Appropriations Committee, both of whom can help significantly on this bill. Appropriations, nice segue into that. I'm not going to talk a lot about that. The president's budget proposal is probably going to be sent to the Congress in mid to late April, quite a bit later than usual. It's usually the first week of February. And, that will start a truncated process. And I think, if there's the reason I included the bullet on climate change is if there's one theme we do know will be predominant is the fact that there's going to be a real effort in all bills to try to address climate change and reduce carbon emissions. So with that, we'll kind of look forward to many things that we can try to help on. And lastly, you mentioned, or Commissioner Rogers mentioned, the return of earmarks. Here's where we stand on earmarks right now. We know for sure that the House Democrats are planning to move ahead on appropriations earmarks. We haven't heard from House Republicans. We know that Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans want to do it, but they haven't formalized that decision yet. So where are we then? What does that mean? House Democrats sent out last Friday their guidelines for what they want to do on earmarks. Relatively small. There's few in number. They're limiting the overall amount they're going to plan to earmark in the total appropriations process to $15 billion or 1% of the bill. So there are 12 different bills. They can decide, each of the subcommittees will be able to decide which of the accounts they want to use for earmarking. And it'll be the competitive discretionary type accounts like the build program in transportation, or some of those types of programs. Those are the ones that they're going to be looking to. Each individual member, Congresswoman Bonamici, is going to be limited to 10 requests. So she will be able to make 10 funding requests of the Appropriations Committee, and she'll try to spread them out across those different bills because she's going to want to make priority for each one of those count. And that's about it. We don't know yet a lot more in terms of how much money how big these requests should be. I think we're going to advise the county that they should be in the range of $1 to $2 million for each project. Not a significant amount, not as much as you might hope to be able to get with earmarking. And what we don't know, but we anticipate is this transportation infrastructure bill will also carry earmarks. And those could be multi-year earmarks in the surface transportation arena, as they have been in the past. And those tended to be bigger earmarks that were, because of the Highway Trust Fund, they were guaranteed over the life of the 5 years of the bill. So there are going to be some, and there are going to be others that are going to be 1 year earmarks because there are, the trust fund doesn't exist for infrastructure programs, for many infrastructure programs or clean energy programs. So there's a lot to be determined on the federal agenda yet, but things are moving in a much more positive fashion. And I should say those programs that aren't earmarked still will be competitive grant programs. And, with the new administration, I'm convinced Oregon will do much better than they have in the past 4 years in terms of competing for these kinds of grants. And, with that, Madam Chair, David and I are happy to take any other questions. We'll turn it back to you.
Can you remind me on the Moving Forward Act with transportation, did that increase the revenue such that the Highway Trust Fund appropriations didn't have to be backfilled?
In other words, was the trust fund made solvent?
Yeah.
It was not. They did not get to the point of addressing revenue.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. Commissioners, questions?
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry, Steve, to keep burrowing down on the transportation infrastructure, but in the old days, we always had in our pocket 3 or 4 requests. I mean, these are specific requests. These aren't just generalized support, something that was in the region. We had them specifically for Washington County because, as you point out, that's always important. I mean, we have things that we can do. We have one on, I don't want to name roads because you won't really know where they're at, but we have a couple of 3 that we can move pretty quickly. If we are correct that we're going to see something movement by the 16th, 17th, 18th at the latest of this month, that's only a couple weeks away. And I don't know whether you've been informed by our staff about very specific projects and have helped them to draft something as the old earmark fashion or not. I see the chair nodding, but have you?
Yes, our government relations team should speak to that.
Perfect.
This is Erin. I'll step in here. So I want to be clear that the bill that Steve was talking about that's planning to move by mid-March is the American Rescue Plan, where not the focus of the major transportation earmarking appropriations processes that we are working on as a staff. I've been meeting with LUT. We are taking part in 2 processes, and it's my understanding that next week I'll be joining LUT in one of their presentations to talk further about this process. We didn't want to bog this presentation down with the regional conversation as well, but we have been, you've seen in your Friday facts that we have been working on identifying some potential projects for that earmarking process, and then we'll come back to you guys to get your prioritization of those potential projects and those asks, not just for having Steve and David with the instructions that they need of what smaller and larger projects will be. We'll also go through an overall process because we need to make sure we're hitting all of the county's needs. But for transportation in particular, we will do the regional conversation at the JPAC table, but we will also have information to Steve and David after you guys have given the LUT guidance they need on selecting from those 5 projects so that they have the information that they need to take those forward to Congresswoman Bonamici, Senators Merkley and Wyden. So there's a little bit more time than mid-March for that, but we want to have those ready to go so that as they're starting that earmarking conversation, our delegation knows what we want already.
And we have visibility into that process-wise, as Erin described, with the rolling agenda that you receive, commissioners receive.
Yeah, and that update to the March 9th agenda item was, I believe, done last week or somewhere around there. So more specificity will come next week, but Steve and David have already met with myself and Chris Deffabaugh and Stephen Roberts to kind of prep them for that conversation, for where you will direct them to go.
So we're on slide number 3, and we need to close this meeting out by 5 minutes of 10. I know just hang on a second, Commissioner Willie. So I want to make sure that I don't know that we're going to be able to get through this whole topic before our 10 o'clock meeting. That's all. Commissioner Willie, you had a question for our team.
Well, actually, I think probably as a comment, I think, Steve, you know that broadband is something that I focused on for Western Washington County and joining forces with others around the state of Oregon. And we're really early in this, but I'm asking you, our GR team certainly knows this, to keep an ear out for any broadband money that's coming through, not only the American Rescue Plan, but anything else, and certainly how we access those funds. So always going to be interested in how we can go about moving ahead on this project. So I appreciate your help on that.
Thank you, sir. And we did share with the staff last week, the FCC issued an order establishing an emergency broadband benefit program of about $3.2 billion. So it is a new initiative that we're happy to work with the county on.
Alan, he needs access. Alan, can you mute? Thank you.
Yes, pardon about that.
It's okay. Sorry, Steve, you might have to reiterate that.
No, I just, Commissioner Wiley, I just was saying that last week we sent to the GR team information on a new FCC order establishing an emergency broadband benefit program that provides $3.2 billion to help lower the cost of high-speed internet. So there are some additional programs that we are working with the county on and trying to make sure that you have all the information on.
Okay, well, we can move on to the next slide if there's no more questions here. So shifting gears here entirely, and thank you, Steve and David. Back to the state. So I'm going to be very brief here because of this timeline is something you've seen before. There's only one additional date. March 19th is the deadline for scheduling work sessions on bills that have been introduced. April 5th is the daily floor session schedule begins, but I want to just caveat that in this digital forum that we're working in terms of the state legislature, these floor schedules shift all the time. And as we saw last week, we had our Senate Republicans walked out, so who knows what's to come. This is just a cursory schedule. April 13th is the deadline for holding work sessions in the first chamber for bills. And so we're getting closer and closer to that ending date in terms of when new bills can be brought to the legislature. And so with that, I'm going to transfer it over to Erin Doyle to talk about some prevailing wage bills. Next slide, please.
Good morning again, Commissioners. Erin Doyle here to talk prevailing wage. Prevailing wage is one of those issues that GR knows that there is no guiding principles that the board has adopted related to this particular topic in either the legislative principles that are adopted as part of the state agenda, nor is there any specific legislative priority, either budgetary or policy-wise, that encapsulates the issues around prevailing wage. So that is in part why you don't see it showing up in the bill tracker that you get, the structured report that comes out of our bill tracking system. But as issues like this kind of bubble to the top, for example, coming up through AOC with their back and forth on the positioning related to some specific bills, we try to keep you informed using the memo that comes with. Not every bill should be in the tracker because it's not the most robust conversation piece that we have put forward. But so giving you that political context, giving you the legislative context, all of those things takes place in the memo. It's similar to what I've done with House Bill 2283, Chair. I'm just checking back in with you. That was making sure that memo sufficiently covered what technical questions you had and that the board had all of it after our last presentation. So with prevailing wage, we wanted to bring this back for the commission to have this policy conversation in particular about whether or not Washington County wants to enter specific positions on any of these prevailing wage bills and direct me in any particular direction as to the level of work that I may or may not do related to any one of these concepts. So just to do a really quick background, to recognize where we are with the time, prevailing wage basically sets a minimum wage for construction projects that happen on publicly funded or publicly owned and operated projects. There are three key purposes that the state set up when they established the prevailing wage policy for the state in 1997. First is to set that minimum wage for both hourly rate and benefits. And they have seen about an 8% increase overall jobs that have a prevailing wage nomenclature with it, and about 11% increase for the lower income construction jobs. The next thing that they want to do is encourage the apprenticeships and training so that we have a better workforce. And they've seen about an 8% increase in the number of apprenticeship opportunities. So it is really successful in meeting that goal. And finally, to encourage the use and competitiveness of local contractors compared to out-of-state contractors, because they all pay the same labor rate. So that takes away from, undercutting your labor costs in order to be successful by being local, having to meet local standards. And they've seen about a 12% increase for local contractors in winning these bids using the prevailing wage methodology. Speaking of methodology, just really quick background there. Currently, there are 14 regions that set different prevailing wage across the state. Washington County is coupled with Multnomah and Clackamas County for our locality, as it is called. And so the state does a wage survey that takes a kind of snapshot in time for 4 weeks over a year, that they ask contractors, what did you pay? Both in hourly rates and benefits. And then over the course of the year, they provide 4 updates for what the prevailing wage should be considered for any particular job classification. If 50% of the hours are reported are union hours, BOLI will, or the Bureau of Labor and Industry, basically sets that union rate as a prevailing wage for the region. If there's less than 50% of the hours under union contract, they use the statewide average rate. And then BOLI can then flex that using other information such as collective bargaining agreements, other surveys, and federal agency and outside agency payments. So basically, once the prevailing wage is set, once a public agency such as the county goes out and advertises a job opportunity, that's the time at which the prevailing wage is set for the scope of the project. And this for all public projects, which are done for a public agency, or if the public agency provides $750,000 or more of the funds for the construction, or if the public agency will own or occupy 25% of the square footage of the project. And this includes not just the buildings that we all think about, but it's also infrastructure projects like roads, sewers, other things that we would also be invested in and own and operate. So for example, that 25% of the square footage might come in if we have a private company build the roads into a new neighborhood. If 25% of the total square footage of development is roads that we would take over, that becomes a public project subject to prevailing wage. So there are 4 bills here that I wanted to bring up based on Chair Harrington's request for this conversation. And I'm going to start with Senate Bill 493 and House Bill 2419. I will say that the expected vehicle for movement is Senate Bill 493, which is scheduled for a work session. It already had its public hearing, and that scheduled work session is next Tuesday on the 9th. So it's just scheduled for a work session, so there isn't a public comment opportunity during that work session, but there is also an amendment that is available. Chair Harrington, I see you have your hand up. So
yes, I have a process question for consideration across all of these bills. As you mentioned, we don't currently have a guiding principle that touches on this, nor am I suggesting that, you know, in the middle of the process that we do that. I think we can pick up on that at a future date for future legislative considerations, agenda considerations. But it takes me back to, I really appreciated through the email communications on the GR memo and bill tracker, you called my attention to the priority. So this is where, and I'm raising it now because that priority is really helping me towards the suggestion of moving forward with this. From my standpoint, given the priority 1, 2, 3, highest, high, and middle, I think this whole package set of bills, this whole topic area really comes under the middle category. You know, others are really the main thrust of this. We know that this mechanism and these bills help further the economic development, specifically workforce development here in Washington County, let alone our region. So as one of 5, my suggestion is that when you engage with folks in the legislature and they're asking what our position is, you know, we have to checkpoint it here as a board, but I would hope, or at least I'm suggesting, that we as a board take a message of support, but with that priority of that level 3 priority, so that it doesn't push out other things that you're actively working for us.
I appreciate that, and I know that this is a point where the board would discuss it. I would like to raise one issue because there is a hair splitting exercise that is about to take place. And that is where perhaps not taking a yay or nay, or having a conversation amongst the board if we have a position on this, because the hair splitting exercise is what the Senate Business and Labor conversation is going to do on Senate Bill 493, is changing whether or not it is the average collective bargaining agreement or the highest wage collective bargaining agreement that would control, if the bill should pass, what the prevailing wage is for an area. And I just want to highlight a couple of things related to that.
I just want to make sure that what I'm getting at is that we approve the general schemes of this. Of course, every bill is going to have its hair splitting details through the course of the process. By our agreeing to something, it's not that we're saying we're signing on to every single form of a bill as it's going to exist through the legislative process. So I just want to make sure that we as a board have the opportunity to exercise our voice this legislative session on this realm of bills. So, I know we're closing in on time. I don't want us to get bogged down, but I'm bringing forward to my colleagues that I think it's time for us to take a positive position on this realm. And I'm asking my colleagues to weigh in on that in this specific work session. Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Yes, I've never been a fan of these prevailing wage bills. I think I just like to hear, I don't want to hear exactly what the bill does. I want to hear the downside and the upside. And we don't hear that. And generally, I go to my outside sources to get that information. I also like to hear what impact it has on jobs that currently are not under the prevailing wage requirements, that this may also include in future. And so this has been a hot topic, obviously, with the city of Hillsborough for years. And so I'm not ready to do that until I have more information of what the potential downside to these are. I think it's too early.
Other commissioners?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I like the portions that have to deal with the job enhancement. I think work programs are always good, but I really don't know the implication when we're talking about 25% of an area. When you're talking about streets and neighborhoods, sidewalks, we don't know what's going to do to the cost of the home. Unless there was a lot more information, I'm not prepared at all to support personally.
Other commissioners?
I'd like to weigh in here. It seems to me that Senate Bill 493 is it's a way of predicting, stability, and I think that it ensures that that piece. I am supportive of this, so I just want to go on record as saying that. I think that one key piece for me is not just the prevailing wage calculation change, but the fact that as we move forward and as we go through this recovery piece, we are going to be so dependent on making sure that we have appropriate jobs, we have the apprenticeships in place and all those pieces, because I believe that that's going to be our focus as we move forward. So that's where I am.
Yep. Commissioner Fye?
I'm in support of the positive stand that you're recommending, Chair, and this is a step in the right direction, and will certainly stabilize some of the wages for a majority of our workers in Washington County. So I support this.
And
I know,
if I may, I have a little bit of an answer to some of the questions about impacts to the county's projects. I have asked our public contracting groups and our LUT departments what they believe the impacts of shifting how the prevailing wage is calculated would probably have a pretty minimal impact on Washington County projects, because our region's wage is pretty much set at collective bargaining agreement cases. The one question that remains that none of us have an answer to is if a highest collective bargaining agreement has a different implication because of accidental impacts we've seen in Washington, the state of Washington. That's the only hair splitting that I would note. Yeah, and so it's a question of the average versus highest accidentally spiking some agreements when classifications aren't tailored enough. But overall, for Washington County projects, it would have a fairly minimal impact if we switch to collective bargaining agreement rates. So that may help answer a question.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for helping me navigate through the pressure of time here. Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Don't we have to, though? I mean, I realize that our county projects all fall under prevailing wage, and that's a given. So I get that. But don't we also have to look at what's the impact on the private sector? And from what I'm told, at least preliminarily a month or so ago, was that most of these jobs all pay prevailing wage or higher. What the mandate of prevailing wage and some of these regulations does is it pushes all of the other wages up. And so now you're above the prevailing wage. And it's just kind of like what we realized when we reclassify a position, and all of a sudden we realize the position above that person has to be reclassified. So it bumps everybody up the food chain. And if we're already at or above the prevailing wage, I just don't like regulation that mandates this. And certainly I always want to look at what's the impact on the private sector, because they're the ones that are going to be most impacted by this legislation.
Thank you for those comments. So go ahead, Commissioner.
Excuse me for interrupting. I think we're going to find that this is really about stabilizing the wages statewide, and that, you know, there's, as Commissioner Willie pointed out, this is something that already exists within our system, and what we're looking at is improving the process to work within that, and the ultimate effect is going to be minimal. And I understand that Commissioner Willie is looking at the private sector, but I also think that they're already aware of what's going on and very well informed there too. So those are my statements.
So I'm sorry that we're going to have to bring this discussion to closure. Thus far, bottom line, with where these bills stand today in their further process, we have at least a majority that is willing to be supportive of those bills moving forward. As mentioned, these are not our high and highest priority bills for the legislative session, but questions have come up with regard to the Washington County stance, and I wanted to ensure that we went through some discussion to better inform our GR team. So at this juncture, I believe this is where we need to pause our work session and transition over to our business meeting. Thank you very much, GR team, for your flexibility, and we'll go from there.
Thank you,
One quick question.
I'm sorry, as the board clerk has told me time and time and again, they're counting on me to end this meeting several minutes, up to 10 minutes before our board meeting at 10. So we're really going to have to bring this to closure.
My question, are we going to stay on the same link? Or are we going to a different link?
No, Commissioner Rogers,
It's
it'll be a different
link
link
every week.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.